Hey there. So this is going to be a video that I'm going to create on Columbia University's first and second campuses. I guess you could say first, second, and third campuses, but I'll get into that in a little bit. Thanks for stumbling on this video. My name is John Shkika. I graduated from Columbia University in 2007 and did my PhD at Teachers College. And I've always been really interested and fascinated by the history of the city of New York. And during this time of COVID and social distancing, I had the chance to, work on some side projects that, had been rattling around in the back of my mind. For some period of time. So this one is actually going to be a video, and I hope you enjoy it. I feel like there's going to be one person watching it, and to you, I say thanks for watching. I'm going to go through a bunch of images looking at the first and second campuses of Columbia University, and I'll talk a little bit about those. I'm going to focus mostly on the second one, which was in existence from 1857 to 1897, mostly because that was a period when photography had come a long way. So we have lots of pictures of that. So I'm going to go through that in just a little bit. I won't be talking about the current Columbia University campus on Morningside Heights. There's lots of great books about that. You can read about that in Bob McCagee's books, Stan Columbia. There's also Andrew Dolkart's book, The Architectural History of Morningside Heights, that really looks at those topics. Two great scholars at Columbia and Columbia University and Barnard College, and they've written the books on those. But I don't think there's much out there really on the older campuses of Columbia. Of course, I've seen some pictures now and then over the years, but really what I wanted to do is to see what I could find that exists in virtual archives. With Columbia Archives closed, I sort of just worked with what I had online, but really just to kind of come up with you could say almost a visual tour of the campuses. So I guess I'll stop talking about that and get started on the places that I want to show you. So the first picture right here is a plaque that is installed on Rector Street in Lower Manhattan, approximately 25 feet from Alexander Hamilton's grave. So this is on the wall of the Trinity Church burial grounds. And it was a plaque that I think was installed around the time of Columbia's 250th, when I was there as an undergrad. I think this was installed in 2004. So this plaque, I could be wrong. If I've made any errors, please let me know in the comments. I'm happy to do a addendum to this. If you are someone listening to this and are interested in this topic, I would love to chat with you and see what research you've done. This is a plaque, birthplace of Columbia University, that I think was installed in 2014 at Trinity Church. It says in 1752, Trinity Church gave a grant of land for a new college. On July the 17th, 1754, it was hot that summer. There was no air conditioning. The first class of King's College, which was to become Columbia University, met in the schoolhouse of Trinity Church located across this street. So I would gather that the schoolhouse was on the south side of Rector Street, and I think there's a pretty tall building there today. I think there may be some sketches of what that schoolhouse looked like. I remember on the the guide of classes when I was there, there was one or two pictures. But I don't think they met at that school for very, very long, perhaps only a year or two. The charter for the college was granted on October the 31st, 1754, during the reign of King George II. So that's, the first meeting place, right? As I said, there's three campuses. This is like campus, like point 0.5, right? They met in the schoolhouse of Trinity Church, and I think there's a misinterpretation that they stayed at that schoolhouse for like a long period of time and the campus was at Trinity Church. But for my sense is that, in fact, it moved up to the Park Place campus near City Hall not too long after that, by about 1756. And that was the building that served as Columbia's campus for almost 100 years. I remember on WikiCU, which is a great repository of Columbia University history, there was this sense that this plaque had somehow been lost, but I checked on Google Maps, and it looks like the plaque is still there. So whoever put that entry on WikiCU is wrong. So there's a plaque memorializing the first site where they had that, the first meetings, and then the first campus, which, as you see, was, according to this, I said 1756. It looks like 1755, according to this plaque, to 1857. So the first 100 years of Columbia was actually this one building called College Hall that existed near Park Place in Lower Manhattan. Um, and that plaque is still there. I think the building, as of 2021, is still like a swanky grocery store where I think you can purchase Martinelli's sparkling cider and maybe some champagne in the window. And just to give you a location for that, just because of COVID, I have not been doing tourist stuff in New York City, but I'm pretty confident it's still there as of May 2021. This plaque marking the first campus, Park Place and West Broadway. So if you find the intersection, it's on the northeast corner, about 15 feet in. And I believe that plaque is still there. I don't know when that plaque was put up. There's some pictures of it, black and white photographs. I would imagine, of course, it was sometime after the move. You could probably look at this plaque. I don't know. Does it look like it's from 1900? It's probably not from before then. It doesn't strike me as a 19th century plaque, but sometime between 1900 and 1950, this plaque was put up to memorialize the site of the first true campus, and really the campus of Columbia University for the first 100 years of its existence. There aren't many photographs of this campus, but there are a few. So this is a photograph. All the photographs that I have here I've found online. I haven't been able to get into the Columbiana archives, and frankly, if not for quarantining and social distancing, would have had the time to work on this project. And I worked on it for about a week, on and off. This is a photograph of College Hall, so you can see it right there. And there's a better picture you'll see in a second. So if you're saying, well, it just doesn't give me a great sense of what College Hall looks like, there's a better one coming up on the next slide. Photographed by President Nathaniel Fish Moore in 1854. He was the president of Columbia at the time. He was also very interested in photography in the 1850s. Photography in the 1850s was pretty rare. I think the earliest images that we have, photographic images, are from the 1830s. Images from the 1840s are pretty hard to find. 1850s images, once again, these are pretty rare images. I think he also took a picture of the house that's like the house in like 'Twas the Night Before Christmas, right? I think it was his family member, Clement Clark Moore. I can't remember if that's his brother that wrote the famous 'Twas the Night Before Christmas poem, right? And well, of course, if he wrote the poem and that's a picture of his house, the name of the house is Chelsea, the namesake for the Chelsea neighborhood in Manhattan, that you can also find online. So the house of 'Twas the Night Before Christmas existed still in the 1850s, and there's also a photograph of that. Also, I think done by Nathaniel Fish Moore around this time in the 1850s. Yeah, and I'm trying to see the history of it given by him. So basically, he took the photograph of the college, he gave it to this doctor, and then who 30 years later gave it to the Columbia College Library, right? So it's like, I guess I don't know how much documentary, but if you would think about like what's going on, I imagine it's like, oh, here's this new fangled technology, photography, right? Hey, his friend, he was the organist, right? Or like, I don't know, who knows? Maybe anyway, Dr. Walter got the picture. Eventually, it made its way to the college archives. Okay. This is a better picture of College Hall, although it's not a picture of College Hall in the best of shape. So this, in the background, is College Hall in about 1857, right before its closing. So you can even see, they're starting to dismantle some stuff. I think they've taken stuff off the cupola. Who knows if they didn't bring it up to the Midtown campus. the building is in kind of rough shape, right? It would be demolished within the next year or two. And I believe this picture is taken in about 1857. What's interesting is these two buildings right next to it still exist. And if you go on Google Earth, and I'll do that in just a second, I'll go to the next picture. Park Place and Church Street, the northwest corner, you can kind of match it up based on the four windows across. And then, of course, the next building has those columns, and you can kind of match it up. And you can match up the windows that have triangles and arches, right? It's triangle, arch, triangle, arch, triangle, arch, triangle, right? And you see that same pattern with the windows on the second store. On the second floor there, you can match up all the architectural elements. And of course, from the maps, we know, where the street kind of ran through the campus. Indeed, those buildings from College Hall Day, 1857, those buildings are still standing, right? Which is kind of cool. That buildings that stood, just across the street from Columbia's first campus for 100 years in Lower Manhattan are still standing. Of course, there's a post-war skyscraper on that site now. I believe the sort of there was a controversial plan to build a mosque in Lower Manhattan that I think got canceled. That I think is over here on this site. So there's some interesting architectural history going on here for sure. But kind of cool. The buildings next to College Hall. Columbia's first campus still standing there, although College Hall itself is mostly long gone. I think the one exception of what was saved from College Hall, as far as I know, maybe some other stuff in the archives that I don't know about, but the cornerstone from College Hall is now in Low Library in the trustees room, which I believe is the first room on the right. You can see that. It's like above the fireplace, I think. You could find a picture of it online. I probably should work on doing a revision and putting that up there. But I don't have an image of the of where that cornerstone was on this particular building. I don't have any idea about that. There is a book that talks about the move to the new campus. I believe I think the book was written in the 1920s, but it had found some documents from 1857. Basically talking about the move out of the old college, and it sort of reminds me when the student center in Barnard closed back in 2007. The students could write their name on the walls, and people were taking memorabilia out, and then eventually the whole building was just emptied out and demolished, lost forever. Outside of a few photographs. There are some sketches of this building, of course, right? This is an age when, painting existed, but probably, I believe, at least of publicly accessible photographs, these are the only two photographs that I know of it. So, of course, I'm always willing to and always looking to add to this collection. As we said, this period is one that doesn't exist in a ton of photographs. I have talked to the Columbiana librarian, and she believes there are some other images of the second campus we're going to talk about, but that will have to wait until at least another month or two with COVID, and who knows how long after. It could be till fall. We don't know. So Columbia decides to move what was then uptown, which is today Midtown Manhattan, and they go to a site that had been the site of the New York Institute for the Instruction of the Deaf and Dumb, which, of course, as we know in 21st century terms are very pejorative terms, which was located at that site before Columbia, starting in 1827. So there was this New York Institute for the Instruction of the Deaf and Dumb, right? One of these institutes that existed out in what was then a rural part of the world, right? Midtown New York was rural then. And as I note here, the depicted building right there, which was this kind of main building for the New York Institute, was used by Columbia until at least the 1870s or 1880s, at which point it was demolished. I had a little bit trouble finding what year this building was demolished in, but it certainly was demolished before Columbia left the Midtown campus, and it certainly existed as late as 1875 or 1876, but was gone by 1886. So we'll get to, well, there actually are some really great pictures of it. And in fact, this building, I would argue, is probably, well, it's because I like neoclassical architecture, I think is the most interesting building of the Midtown campus. And I'll explain more why in a bit. So anyway, this was the pre-existing site. I think what happens is Columbia buys this. The New York Institute goes even further uptown, right? Like institutions are sort of leapfrogging their way uptown, as is commonly the case then, right? At this period. So let's continue on. There you see what the asylum looked like at that time before Columbia moved in. It was basically that main building that you saw there. At this point, there were 2 wings added. I believe there was some sort of gatehouse. And then most importantly for getting our vantage, this is Park Avenue. And Park Avenue was, at this point and until much later, was kind of an open air street that had the tracks of the railroads going down it that would go into an earlier version of Grand Central. So it was kind of like, it was like living by the railroad tracks, right? And as we'll see with Columbia, the side of the school that was like the engineering and the School of Mines were put by like the dirty part, right, where they're doing all the experiments and stuff, was the side that was near the railroad tracks. It was kind of like the back end of campus, sort of like today at Columbia. There's that area of like the grove underneath it that goes to the gym. That's kind of like where they put all the garbage bins, right? Like that's kind of the back end of the building. The front end is over here. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in a bit. 49th Street is kind of the main, will be kind of the entrance street to the campus. It's kind of in the same way that Columbia, until they closed off College Walk, like this is that campus is 116th Street, and this is that campus is 120th Street. If you're trying to get a visual sense of it, what I tried to do in the slides coming up is to get a real sense of like how would we do a tour of this campus, right? What I tried to do as kind of a historical reconstruction is if like a tour guide was giving a tour, circa 1890 of Columbia College and Columbia Law School and the Columbia School of Mines and the Columbia Engineering School, what the heck would that look like? So I'd seen pictures of this for a long time, for the last 15 years, but I was trying to piece together what it looked like visually. When I did it, after the first few pictures, you'll see I kind of go around it, kind of starting on the south side of campus and then kind of walking around in a counterclockwise fashion. So if we think about it like in our modern Columbia campus, for those of you that have been there, it's like you kind of start in front of Alma Mater on College Walk or the Sundial. You kind of walk out to Broadway. You go up to Pupin Hall. You go around the backside. You come down by Skirmerhorn, and then you go back in campus, back to the Sundial, if that makes sense. Roughly, that's kind of how I went about it. So this is, kind of a map. Once again, you can find some of these on WikiCU. Others are from a book called Views of Columbia College, 1886, which is digitized by the Columbia University Libraries that I got a lot of the really cool images from. But this was the campus pretty much at the end of it, right? So I talked about that, that kind of tour I was doing, that counterclockwise tour, right? I'm just kind of tracing that, and I think you can see that with my cursor. And 4th Avenue is Park Avenue, right? It was called 4th Avenue, eventually became Park Avenue. There is still a 4th Avenue, just a little piece of it way down in near the East Village, but 4th Avenue is Park Avenue. And just for a point of reference, this corner right here, if you go kitty corner across the street, you're actually at the southeast corner of St. Patrick's Cathedral today. So this campus was kitty corner with today's St. Patrick's Cathedral. And in some of the pictures coming up, we'll see St. Patrick's Cathedral in the background. Yeah, one of the sort of myths is that this campus was at Rockefeller Center. No, it was the other side of it. They also, Columbia owned the land of Rockefeller Center until the 1980s, but it was actually this site that they decided to build on a few blocks away. Really only like 2 blocks away. Okay, so let's go. And as we see, this is kind of the end. This is that campus by its end. We have the library, also where the law school was, the president's house, which I don't have. There's not a ton of great pictures of the president's house. That's kind of like the one building that we don't see a ton of. And it gives the descriptions of the buildings, right? So library, 6 stories, basement, cellar, what does it say? Fireproof construction, brick wall. That's a pretty nice building. It's probably the nicest building and the one we have the most interior pictures of. The original Hamilton Hall, which was the home of the college, Columbia College, 4 stories, a basement and a cellar, fireproof construction of brick, and Potsdam sandstone and trimmings that went along Madison Avenue. 50th Street, as we said, sort of the back end of the college. There was a chapel, which I don't have any real great pictures of. The chapel was kind of behind the library, and for most of the time before this was where the administration building was from the New York Institute, and there are some pictures of that. But the chapel was sort of wedged in between everything. So I don't think there's any real great pictures of the chapel, at least not that I've come across. And then we have the School of Mines that I think had some early buildings that got demolished, and then like a later building, 4 stories, basement and attic, fireproof construction, same sort of deal. That was kind of the back end. And remember, this went along, I believe it was the New York Central Railroad. And then there's another one. I'm having a little trouble reading. I'm not sure what boiler house. So I don't know if that was like the power plant sort of deal. If there was steam power. I'm not, I guess, an expert, on the second half of the 19th century. Like, is this a period where we have gaslight and oil? I'm not, that goes a little beyond my, my technology. This is a start of a project. It certainly isn't the finishing point of what exactly this would have looked like. One day I'm hoping to maybe do something in 3D. I know some people have done some like great stuff in Minecraft with the current campus, and people have like recreated older parts of City College's campus. So that's something I'm gonna kind of look into. That's a project for another day. But yeah. So anyway, I'll stop babbling. I'm going to start the tour basically a view of Columbia College, probably as it looked in the beginning when it first moved up there. So, right as it, they probably could have had a photograph of this, right? Because we had a photograph of the old one. But I don't have a photograph of this campus when it was just that building, right? And it's a little cut off there, Columbia College from 49th Street. And we see that building that was the administration building of the New York Institute for the deaf and dumb. And we know that's there because of these pillars. And I'm going to talk actually about those a little bit more, because in doing this research, I didn't realize there was some neoclassical architecture, but there is. And I have a theory on it that I can't prove, but it's a theory I kind of just learned about. Okay, so this is Stokes writing in 1869 about the new Midtown campus. He writes, the new location of the college is a delightful one. The old asylum buildings have been altered somewhat, repaired, and greatly improved. The 2 wings have been separated from the main building. The east wing is occupied by the chapel and the extensive library of the college. The center U-shaped structure for the recitation rooms and the residence of President King, and the west wing for the residence of some of the college professors. A beautiful lawn slopes from the college southward down to 49th Street and is ornamented by some fine old trees. This will be for the present the main entrance to the college, but as soon as the more extensive grounds northward to 50th Street can be graded, laid out, and properly embellished, the principal entrance will be in that direction. This site is on a commanding eminence, affording an extensive and pleasant view. The only caveat I would say is, as far as I can tell, 50th Street never became the principal entrance. And in fact, it's sort of like, kind of slopes upward, just like with 116th up to 120th, that there's kind of like a wall on the north side, on the 50th Street side, that I don't think would have made for a good, so I don't really, I can't remember who Stokes is, or, I think that was wishful thinking on Mr. Stokes's part. I don't think that was ever going to happen. Sorry, Mr. Stokes. Again, make any corrections you have. Tell me if I'm wrong, but I just don't think that ever happened. And as you can see, here we see really a 49th Street entrance. And I'll get to this, I'll point this out later, but that gate right there is one of the few pieces of the Midtown campus that still exists. It is the gate that is in front of John Jay Hall today. If you go into John Jay Dining Hall, there's that little gate there. That is the same gate. And there's some pictures that will corroborate that story in just a little bit. And there's a plaque on the current gate to show you that. Okay, this is another picture. Columbia College, it's the same view basically. And I think this building right here is that president's house that I said we don't have many pictures of. I think this is that president's house, right? So this is that main building, the wings, right? So I think this is where the chapel and the library initially were. If you listen to that description of 1869, that's where the professor's residence are. And, I think that had been the classrooms, and the president had lived there. And then I think they built him his house on 49th Street. It does say 50th Street, but this picture is pretty clearly, for all intents and purposes, taken from 49th Street, though Columbia College seems to have used 50th Street as their official location during this period, right? So even if the entrance was still really on 49th Street, I guess the main building was kind of on 50th Street, sort of in the same way that, like, they say Low Library is on 116th Street, even though it's like probably closer to 117th Street. This picture right here is taken from 49th and Madison. And as you can see, the drawings kind of made it look like it was a little more spacious than it was, right? Like, this lawn is the width of like a contemporary brownstone, right? Because this is like 50th Street. I mean, this is only like one block wide, one New York City block wide, one avenue, which is a good distance. But remember, this is only one block wide, right? So we're talking today. If you're thinking of Columbia's campus, the campus is only the width of John Jay and is it Hartley or Wallach? I should know, but I don't. Right? Hartley or Wallach? I can't remember. I think it's Wallach. I can't remember. Right. So it's relatively small. It's only about a block wide. Yeah. And so here you see this is what I assume are those professors' residences that they mention. Kind of obscured is that first site of the library and the chapel, which we don't have very good pictures of, and it sounds like it was repurposed from the New York Institute, and then the main building of the New York Institute. And again, now that it's winter here or fall, we see the columns again, the Ionic columns that are also used on Low Library. And again, I have a theory about this that I think you can start to guess what that theory is. And then as we can see, this is one of the gates. And I think there's another gate that's over here that's a little obscured from view. So I think there's at least two gates on this side. I don't believe this gate has survived. Could be wrong, but I don't think it has. All right. And here now, actually, that could be the same gate and it got moved. Can't tell if there's another gate here that's obscured and this is a second gate, or when they built this hall, that one got moved. So here you see the campus in probably the late 1870s, early 1880s. Which I think it's after 1882 because I believe that's when Hamilton Hall is built. I should add the exact dates of these. I do have them written down somewhere. So here we see now a building has been built. This is the original Hamilton Hall. It goes along Madison Avenue. All right. The west wing of the old main building has been torn down. The main building is still there. Now you can see a little bit more. That building is now a chapel. And right here, you can see they're starting to do some work. That's where they're going to build the law school and the library. And then, of course, this is 49th Street out here in front. This is the whole campus. This is a drawing of it by the time it was completed. Um, we see Hamilton Hall. We see the law school and the library. Um, this is the president's house. That looks like it faced um, Park Avenue, the railroad tracks, and then this is the completed engineering school. And then, of course, we see kind of kitty cornered in the back. Their perspective is a little off, I think. Right, St. Patrick's Cathedral right there. And then some of the churches. I think those three churches are still standing. There are 2 or 3 churches on Fifth Avenue today that are still standing, I believe. St. Patrick's Cathedral, as you know, of course, is. Okay, so that's a lithograph of it. This one's a little better. It's in color. I don't know if we have a date on it. And it says from 49th Street looking north, right? So this is 49th and Park today. And you might ask, spoiler alert, like what's on this site today? It is basically 2 buildings. Although there were a few brownstones in the back that were demolished only about 10 years ago. They put a vent for the east side access when they were trying to bring the LIRR into Grand Central. They built it on the site of these brownstones, and they actually did a great architectural study that I looked at researching this. They were worried that perhaps the old administration building had a cellar, and they were going to dig into an old cellar from this campus. Their conclusions were that there were no remnants of this campus there in the cellar, and their digging basically got rid of the last remaining piece of land that theoretically could have held artifacts from this time. So there's basically nothing left on this site with 99.999% certainty. There's no brownstones that maybe have a sub-basement or anything like that. It's all gone. It's all in the, a landfill somewhere. This is more towards the center of that campus, right? You can see once again the law school and the library. That's the administration building. It says a bit of old and new, but it all looks pretty old. I don't know what's old and new. And then that says that it was taken in 1884. So I don't know if that building is old and the Gothic building is new. I don't know. Nothing. It all looks historical to me. But I guess Gothic maybe was ooh, the new thing then, right? Neo-Gothic. Okay, cool. Pretty much that same view. Again, the library and the law school. I think the law school is this side, and this side is the library. Could be that the law school classrooms are underneath. I don't really know. Don't have a ton of interior shots that I've been able to see yet to give a sense of what the classrooms look like. As we said, the library is built circa 1885. This is now on 49th Street. And in the back, we can kind of see that president's house. And right here is the gate that is now in front of John Jay Hall on the current campus. Law school is housed in the same building, right? This is some sort of lithograph presented to Theodore Dwight, who is the dean of that law school. I think one of the pillars at the current campus might be named for him. I could be wrong. Something's named for him in the current campus. I want to say it's one of the pillars on 116th Street, but that could be wrong. But anyway, that's some gift to him, and just kind of a nice lithograph of the law school. Again, kind of moving down. This is that gate that we mentioned. That's still there by John Jay Hall, right? You can match up the details of it, and maybe in a month or two, once COVID hits, I'll try to get a nice close-up of that gate that I never took a picture of before. This is from the book, and a lot of these views kind of coming forward are from that book, 1886 Columbia College Views. This is what they call East Quadrangle, Library, School of Mines, and President's House. So yeah, the School of Mines is in the backdrop. This is the President's House, which I don't know. I can't tell. That could be a front door, so maybe it looks into the campus. It might look out onto. Actually, it probably makes more sense that it looks into the campus. Again, I don't have any real good. You won't see any good pictures of the president's house. So I'm not sure exactly what it looked like. Kind of looks like. That's actually another idea, right? I'll mention this at the end, right? Seth Lowe of Lowe Library and Nicholas Murray Butler of Butler Library, who were both presidents of Columbia College. Seth Lowe from about 19 from 8. What was it? When was he? 1890 to 1901, and then Nicholas Murray Butler, was he president for like 40 years, something like that, until about 1945, 46, 47, 48, somewhere around there. This was the Columbia that they went to, right? So I do wonder of, like projects that existed during their time, how much of it were influenced by this campus, right? So I think this idea of the gated Columbia, right, is clearly, right, like it's a similar idea about gating, although gates are everywhere, but the idea of having like the president's house on campus, right? And this president's house doesn't look all that different, from the small images we can see of the current one on Morningside Drive. And I have one more thing I want to say about that influence piece, but I won't say it just yet. I want to wait till I get to the good picture of it. Again, we're kind of pulling out, across the street on 49th Street now, of that same building, right? So, actually, sorry, no. Then this is kind of moving down along the street, and then this is that other Hamilton Hall we'll see a little bit more of in a second, right? And West Quadrangle. So there's kind of these two quadrangles. They're both very small, Now we're kind of moving down 49th Street to Madison Avenue. From Madison Avenue, 49th Street. These would be brownstones, but more elaborate brownstones across the street. This is that library building, tree for shade, the gate. So it looks like there were gates on both sides. See that? There's definitely a gate here, and there is one there. So maybe one of the gates is the one at John Jay, and the other one went in the, scrap heap. But yeah, it does look like there are two separate gates now. Going through this with you all for 35 minutes, I'm noticing new things. This is the view of that Hamilton Hall, right, which we'll see right here. Actually, the coolest view of Hamilton Hall is actually on the 50th Street side, so we'll get to that image in just a second. But this is along the Madison Avenue side. Haight was the architect of most of this campus. He also did buildings at Yale. I'm not really an architectural historian, so I don't know where else he did buildings, but kind of that, anything built in the, I think the DC to like New York quarter in this time period from like 1870 to 1890, often has the, of that neo-Gothic style. 1886, this is, all right. This might be the same exact picture. Maybe not. It's hard to tell sometimes. 1879, Hamilton Hall is built, which, remember, is not too much earlier than the other Hamilton Hall, which I think is built in, 1904? Right, so this Hamilton Hall, only predates it by about 25 years. This Hamilton Hall is only, there for, 15 years before it's demolished, right? Just to kind of show you, like how New York City is rapidly growing at this time, that a nice, Gothic building like this can be built in 1879, and by 1895, 1896, it's already getting leveled to put up a 10 or 12 story building, which is kind of crazy. Similar view of that building, a little bit better in the daylight. Some cool stained glass windows, looks like up there. You got that little turret on the other corner. We'll get to the picture of that. We're going to go down the street. All right, this is the sort of transportation at the time. We don't yet have a subway. We do have railroads, and I believe we have elevated trains at this time. But we also still have, horse-drawn wagons, right? So that's, it's kind of like, we've got big architecture, and we still got, horses pulling wagons, which is kind of cool, this period. This is the period of time, I actually think it's a very fascinating period, kind of the post-war era from about 1875 to 1900, where you see like the rise in electricity, telegraphs and telephones, not quite radio or television, um, motion pictures for the first time, um, you know, railroads starting to become like a real like mode of transportation. Sherlock Holmes, which is written in the mid 1880s, I feel like is contemporaneous, although I think London's a little more advanced. But that's the sort of, I've read a lot of the Sherlock Holmes books, like half of them, at least the first half of them, the earlier books, and at least that for me has helped me to kind of figure out like what technology might exist, right? Like probably looking at some sort of gas lamp stuff, but probably not incandescent. Again, my knowledge of specific dates and like technology, getting technology down and like what exists at what time is, I always find a little more challenging than you would think for a historian. So then this is kind of going up to 50th Street, and we have the yeah, that's actually the old college, right? So that's can't tell if that comes from a picture. Pretty similar view to like the original picture of the first campus. I don't know. It's a stairway leading somewhere. Some of the interior archways I can't quite figure out exactly what they look like. And then this is on 50th Street, right? So the same horse-drawn carriage, this time going up the street, and it says the Columbia Centennial, right? So, um, interestingly enough, this is probably right. So Columbia uses now that 1754 date, but when King's College was founded, I think we like anniversaries. So it's like, oh, we use the King's College founding date, and then I think at this period they were also using the Columbia founding date, which I think was 1784 or 1787. So this is probably, I imagine, from 1884 or 1887. I think I have a document from that period, and I can't remember which one it is, but you'll have to roll with that. Similar image. Um, Colorized. I think that this one they say is from the School of Mines. I don't know. They're probably like breathing in toxic fumes, right? And then of course this is that main building with the columns that I've mentioned that I've kind of like teased that we'll see when we go around. We'll go inside to it because I think it's like some of the best pictures. This is it in 1885, and this building right here is interesting because the Villard houses is still standing today at 50th and Madison, right? So, right, we have that turret of the original Hamilton Hall. The Villard houses still standing today. And you can, right, and this is actually kind of taken from the kind of where really this is what like the cardinal or archbishop of New York kind of looks out. His house is on the east side of St. Patrick's Cathedral, and he would look out into, to this day, right? He looks out onto these Villard houses, still standing today at 50th and Madison, right? And you can see them from this Google Earth image, right? There are the Villard houses, and today this is where, right, this block is the one that Columbia's campus stood on, right? Which is like a mid-century office building. There's two of those, and as we said, there's that one space where there were a couple of brownstones that got demolished 10 years ago to make the exit thing for them, forgetting words, for the Long Island Railroad. Okay. So this is the backside, right? This is that administration building I keep talking about. At some point in the mid to late 1800s, it was leveled, so there was like another kind of grass space here, but nothing ever replaced it, right? So you can kind of see in this view kind of through to the campus, right? It actually looks less crowded than it did earlier, and we can kind of see some of the brownstones that existed there. They would be all gone. These brownstones almost certainly are all gone as well, built up by more commercial buildings, right? And so we've got, and as you can see, right, like that 50th Street, as I was mentioning, like there's a bit of a height difference there, right? It's kind of raised up, so that never became the like entrance that they were hoping it would be. This is a picture I really like of that administration building that got demolished. Because we can see here the lovely columns, right? And to me, those columns look like the columns of Low Library, right? So until I, saw this picture, I hadn't really realized that there was any neoclassical um, architecture in Columbia's second campus. I didn't realize that at all. And then I saw this and I said, I wonder if this, which was the administration building, gave Seth Low or maybe some of the trustees the idea, we'll kind of take that motif that we really liked, that was our centerpiece building on campus, and that's what we're going to use to design Low Library, for example. And I'll give you another image to sort of reinforce that idea. Yeah, this is a picture, and at first I was like, wait, where are those columns? I thought it was maybe another building near campus, right? But this is President Barnard, right, who is, the president of Columbia, I think from the 1850s, maybe the early 1860s up till 1889, standing on the balcony of the administration building, right? You can see the railing right there, and I think this is from 1874, so I think this is before football. So I suspect this is, I don't know. I think they've won probably a regatta race. I'd have to track down exactly what sporting event this is from, and they're coming back to campus heroic because they won the big boat race, right? And then there's President Barnard there in the mid 1870s, and we could imagine that Seth Low, who I think is an 1870s graduate of the college, right? Who knows? Could be there, right? Like that could be him. That guy looks kind of like Seth Low. And perhaps he's inspired, like, let's keep those campus columns, right? That neoclassical architecture. We want to see more of that. I like that majesty, right? Like, this is a cool view. I don't know. I always prefer, I'll say this, more neoclassical architecture compared to neo-Gothic. I don't know. Gothic is like a vampire architecture, and neoclassical is more like the triumph of ancient Rome. So, yeah, we'll keep going. Again, this is kind of that kind of inner courtyard, right? We see the law school and the library, and then we see also the columns of that main administration building. Does it say west entrance? I don't think there's anything there. Again, the columns kind of going over to the library, the law school. Again, I'm not sure exactly the layout of that building. Don't have a great sense of it. Again, you can see the columns, right? It says Columbia College Library West entrance, so perhaps the library entrance is over here. There might be another entrance. Not 100% sure. This is another picture, again, somewhere in there. Having a little trouble kind of figuring it all out with this. I think this might be kind of in the back. That could be Hamilton Hall. This could be like the other side, like where this is kind of in the back. This one I'm having a little trouble, fitting in with the rest of it. This right here, right, is now, I believe, the inner, like an older image. I think this one is probably 1860s, right? We can see the School of Mines, Columbia College, right, which is later replaced, right? So it's kind of these older buildings that look out onto 50th Street right there. I think this was taken from one of the C's, timelines of their history. So I think this is like an older picture. And then, of course, we see, and I'm pretty sure that this is on the inside, right? And then this is on the outside, right? So you kind of see these buildings, right? Those three buildings, right? And this might be that chapel building, right? So you see those three buildings, right? And then you see that School of Mines, which is like, I don't know, looks like a tacky, like 1920s road sign, but I think it's happening on both sides, right? School of Mines, Columbia College on the inside, and then on the outside there. And right, we can see like this person's probably putting themselves in a little danger because this is the tracks, right, that go to Grand Central to this day, that the viewer is standing on, right? And it looks like there might have been a person there that during the exposure kind of moved out of the way. And right, this is the north east corner, right, 50th and 4th Avenue, or 50th and Park Place. And eventually this stuff looks like it gets demolished and built with like kind of a sturdier building at some point, which doesn't last very long. This is that sturdier building, right? And we can see the development. So, what had been before, I mean, unpaved, open tracks. Now we've got some cobblestones, and we've got this kind of newer addition to get rid of the old one that has like the billboard. But again, this probably wasn't used for more than 15 years at most. And there we see it, right? So actually, like, this is being taken right up against the tracks, right? You say, oh, good, there's a paved street there, but like right off the view now, we can see is still the tracks, right? And now, of course, they have a overpass, right? The photographer of this picture probably got hit by the train and they had to build an overpass. Right? I'm sure there were people, unfortunately, they got killed, right? We still see, right now we're seeing, though, that there's paved roads. Um, this is kind of an intermediate picture because that admin building has not been demolished yet there, right? See the tower of Hamilton Hall. Suspect that's a church, but don't know which one. Cost of engineering at this time. This is an image I have of students. And I think School of Engineering had this on their website. They definitely wanted to point out that this student, I believe, was from Liberia. An African student who, he may have had African American roots, right, during the period when freed slaves went to Liberia, right, the American Colonization Society, came back perhaps to study. I imagine they maintained links with Liberia. I know that's another whole historical topic, right? But they clearly showed that picture because they're trying to have this sense of like, well, there is some diversity even in the class of 1877 with their fancy mustaches. I think the guy with the best mustache gets to go in the center there, and their fancy top hats. This is the engineering class. Don't have a ton of pictures of students again. I'd like to go in the archives and get a little more of student life from this period. This is an image with Harper's Weekly. I kind of scoured that. This is the cane rush, which is still like a tradition at Princeton, or at least was until recently. Basically, like the freshman and the sophomore class fight over a cane and basically just like beat the shit out of each other, right? Like this guy's like, oh, this sucks, right? And like that guy's like, I'm dying. So it's like a terrible tradition. I think it had died out. No, I think at Columbia they were still doing something with like fighting over a ball in the 1940s or 1950s, but obviously not a great tradition. That guy's not happy about it. That's probably Nicholas Murray Butler, and he's like, I'm banning this when I'm the president. This is bullshit. So I don't know where this takes place. I don't think this takes place on campus. There was some sense, they would. I know there was at least, Columbia College Athletic Association that did some stuff up in the Bronx. They also had a field site that I don't know where that was before Butler or before Baker Field. Tracking down the college at that time is hard enough. Tracking down athletics in the 1870s, 1880s, that's another whole thing. So this is from the other side. I don't know what these are. They're vents or like what's going on there. That always kind of mystified me. I'm not sure what's going on. I think it's the other side of the library though, right? So there's entrances on both sides. I don't know what's going on with that. I don't know if that's vents or what. And now we're going to go into the college library, kind of traditional looking library, like lots of leather-bound books that you shouldn't touch. This is probably the greatest like indoor shot of the library. Kind of this beautiful, beautiful building. Very much in the same style of. There's a building at Harvard that today is the freshman dining hall that has like the stained glass windows. That's really cool. And I mentioned the stained glass windows because one of them is on the first floor today of Hamilton Hall. There's the Virgil and the Sophocles, which apparently Dean Quigley like found in storage that had been in storage for like a good 70 years that were in this library. And I'll show a picture of them. I think the story goes that they were in this library, then they went up to Hartley Hall, and then Mr. Hartley didn't like them for whatever reason. They were probably out of fashion at the time, right? They're very much 1800 stained glass, and I'm sure by the early 1900s, right? Like today we think of that as old-fashioned, right? But that's, I think, that was the time of the Armory show and, the middle of the teens, right? Modernism is big then. And I don't think Tiffany stained glass, by 1915, I don't think Tiffany stained glass is in vogue anymore, right? We're almost moving, we already have uh, uh, Frank Lloyd Wright and modernist movements, right? Like that's just like tacky old-fashioned stuff. And so I think it went away until like the old becomes the old and boring becomes new and old and cool again, right? And that idea of fashion. But this is a really cool building. There's kind of high vaulted ceilings, but very similar to that freshman dining hall at Harvard today. That has some of those similar types of Tiffany stained glass. I can't remember the name of it. I think it's like Memorial Hall, right? Here's another building. So here you can see the stained glass is a little bit better. We'll get a close-up of the one that's at the current Columbia campus. More views of that. The light kind of shining in. I kind of like that look. It's pretty cool. Little blurry pictures. Again, these are all photos I found online in various places, just kind of scouring for what I could find, image searches, and so various databases. I suspect there's more pictures and some better quality ones out there, but this just gives you a sense of it. And this is, of course, a drawing. Again, we've got some old portraits. Some probably have survived. Some have probably gone in the garbage or burned. And then you can see, this might be that figure of Sophocles I'll show in just a second. Is that Sophocles? My ancient Greek is, Sophocles. You can read ancient Greek letters. It's not that hard. So that's Sophocles right there. And that's one of the two stained glasses. I think it's Sophocles and Virgil. I don't think it's Cicero. Virgil that are in Hamilton Hall on both sides, right? As you go to the center, that's the dean of Columbia College. Off to the left is the undergrad admissions office, and then all the classrooms upstairs. Still there. This is a picture from 1885, 1886. Stored away for a long time, and Dean Quigley brought it back in like the late 90s renovations. So besides the gate, I believe this window, besides the gate in front of John Jay, I believe this window is the only piece of the Madison Avenue campus that is preserved. If I'm wrong, tell me I'm wrong, but that's what I'm betting, that the cornerstone from the first campus is in the Low Library, and then the gate and this window from the second campus, and everything else is long gone. Again, could be wrong, but that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Silence in the library, no talking. It's a place for studying. Some portraits. I imagine that might be Miles Cooper, who was like one of the presidents of Columbia. The other ones I'm not able to recognize. Got a little natural history museum that was kind of in vogue at the time, right? Really, yeah, it really speaks to that period, right? Kind of looks like a natural history, the Museum of Natural History, but like it's old quarters where everything's like all crammed together. And who knows? Some of that stuff could be in the Natural History Museum. Some might still be at Columbia. I honestly have no idea. We're getting to the end of the presentation. Why does this campus matter at all? Like some of the figures that are like famous Columbia today. Actually, the one you probably wouldn't know, Robert Goulet. I've always made the Robert Goulet joke on the Columbia alumni page a few times. A class of 1860. So he graduated, probably the first class that, well, I think they left in 1857. So he actually may have gone to the original campus and graduated in 1860. I don't know when he died, but his wife left money to build the alma mater statue, right? So the alma mater statue, which is right in the center of the current campus, dedicated to his memory. And in some ways, right, he sort of transcends all three campuses, because he probably would have had his freshman year down at the original campus for the first 100 years. He would have been at this new campus when it was early on, and then I think he died in 18. I'm not sure. That's a good question. But he was certainly dead by the time the alma mater statue was installed in 1904, right? But in some ways, he sort of transcends the three campuses, right, or kind of connects them in that way. That alma mater is, money that his widow left to Columbia, which is kind of fascinating. Seth Low's class of 1870 was off by a few years. As I said, I think that Seth Low may have been inspired by those. I'll go back here. Right, those ionic columns in the making of Low Library. Just a speculation, but there's something about right. He was probably, as you said, 1870s. This may be a few years later, but I'm sure he saw President Barnard, right, and there was this idea of that should be the centerpiece, right? These beautiful columns, right, of our library. And then right, so the names say, the guy whose the money went for alma mater statue, Seth Low, is the president. Brought the Morningside campus up. Graduated in 1870. He went to this Columbia, and then Nicholas Murray Butler, Columbia class of 1882, who I think was briefly president of the nascent Teachers College and became president of Columbia right after Seth Low went and became mayor and was president for half a century. It's also worth noting he was a pretty well-known anti-Semite and kind of a Hitler supporter-ish, right? He certainly wasn't opposed to Hitler, right? I mean, he has a pretty problematic legacy, but he went to, for the purpose of this, he went to that Columbia as well, and Butler Library, which was, I don't think it was named after him. It's a good question. I don't know if it was named after him or late in his tenure or when he died, but it was built in the 1930s, right? Butler certainly oversaw the architecture of the building of that. You wonder if he too, if we think of the two buildings that are most inspired with the Ionic columns, right? They're named after and were built by, with under the tutelage of Low and Murray Butler, right? Who certainly had those images of the Ionic columns on the Midtown campus. Right, and so I wonder, did that resonate with them? The columns look very similar, so just a supposition, but and of course we know classical architecture was quite famous. McKim, and White are known for using columns, but if you think of many of their achievements, I think a lot of the columns in Penn Station are Doric, and something like the Vanderbilt Mansion in Hyde Park uses Corinthian. It would be interesting to see how often they're using specifically the Ionic columns. That's an interesting question, right? But both, I think both Low and this campus had the Ionic columns. I'm not sure about Butler. That's a good question. Anyway. So this is actually from the study that was done about those vents at the LIRR. And basically what they did was they did about a 50-page report to say, was there going to be some issue when they built those vents, right? And this is what so imposed upon this is kind of the map at the time, right? These were all the lots on 49th Street. This was that Hamilton Hall. The admin building had been kind of destroyed by then. This is that library law school. This is the president's house. This is the School of Mines. So they were really worried about this kind of annex building, which I think was the chapel, and the two buildings next to the School of Mines, right? That kind of, that west chapel, originally kind of library that was probably from the New York Institute times, and then that building next to it that was one of the earlier buildings of the School of Mines. These were the ones that they were worried might still exist, right? By the late 1890s, they were vacant, but they said, well, maybe they kind of bulldozed them. They left some of the basements, and they built some brownstones, right? And then there's going to be some under basement that we didn't see. That's going to be a problem for excavating these LIW. They want to be doubly sure. So they paid some, I think some folks up in Connecticut to do a real comprehensive 50-page study of this site. And from it, you can kind of some of the narrative I've been giving you is from reading that as well to kind of reconstruct it. So yeah, I'll leave it about there. That was about an hour. Hope you enjoyed the presentation. Of course, thanks for stumbling on it. I've given you nothing about Columbia's current campus. Sorry about that if you thought I was going to talk about that. That's a video for someone else to make. Uh, Not me. I just chose this kind of more obscure kind of campus, and the reason this interests me is because look, it's a campus that some important figures in Columbia history went to, but in some ways it's a campus that only exists in photographs and in our imagination. Like it doesn't like where is it? It's in a landfill somewhere. There's a gate and there's a window, and the rest is in a landfill or in some pictures, right? To think about those like historical memory and sites that are totally gone. There's lots of that in New York City. I've listened to some presentations, some great presentations on like some of the Vanderbilt homes, and I think there were like 6 or 7 Vanderbilt homes on Fifth Avenue. Beautiful buildings, and just because the rise of New York City and skyscraper culture, like even the Vanderbilts were like we're taking the cash and getting out of town, and going out to Newport for the summer and getting rid of these big mansions. So like those Vanderbilt mansions, which were beautiful on Fifth Avenue, they're all gone. This Columbia campus, because of just the rise in real estate prices, they were like we're gone, and it's all exists only in the memories. And there's a lot of theaters too. Actually, there's the Herald Square Theater area, and buildings like the old Metropolitan Opera, and yeah, lots of really cool spaces that if you go to like Philadelphia or Boston are more likely to be preserved. Kind of those pre 1890 things, those are more preserved in those cities. In New York, they exist only in memories, right? So they're it's kind of like amazing architectural gems that just because land is expensive in New York, were demolished. So I think in that way, right? Like some of the, I mean, there's cool commercial architecture in New York, and skyscraper culture is its own thing. But some of the really cool buildings that you see in a Boston or a Montreal or a Philadelphia, they don't exist. A lot of that kind of neo-Gothic stuff doesn't exist nearly as much in New York City. There are some neighborhoods that were kind of spared for various reasons, right? Downtown has more of that. Think of something like Cooper Union's main building, right, and some stuff in the East Village, right. Some of those have survived, but particularly the stuff that was in Midtown is long gone, and Columbia's campus, is kind of a victim to. I mean, a victim in the sense that some cool architecture was lost. The trustees kind of made bank, and you know, probably had to like get a second belt to tie up their pants from all the gold that was weighing it. And I think they wrote you a check. But right, like they made a lot of money off the sale of this campus. And yeah, so that's where I'll leave it. Of course, you have any questions or any critiques or whatever, or just leave them in the comments. And I hope you enjoyed this. All right, take care.